Have you ever noticed how certain people trigger you in ways that feel almost supernatural? They don't even know you well. They haven't done anything particularly offensive. They simply exist. And suddenly, you feel this unexplainable irritation, this magnetic pull of discomfort. Now here's what's unsettling. The people who annoy you the most often share traits you refuse to acknowledge in yourself. The ones who attract you most powerfully mirror parts of your psyche you've never fully integrated. Carl Jung said, "We meet ourselves time and again in 1,000 disguises on the path of life. That's where the real mystery lies. You think you're reacting to them, but you're actually reacting to yourself. Every person who enters your life is a mirror reflecting back aspects of your own unconscious mind. This isn't mystical thinking, it's psychological reality. What Jung discovered is that we carry within us a collective unconscious, a shared reservoir of human experiences and archetypes that connects us all at the deepest levels of psyche. When someone irritates you intensely, when you find yourself obsessing over their behavior, when you can't stop thinking about how they're wrong, selfish, or destructive, you're encountering your own shadow. The shadow is everything you've rejected about yourself, everything you've pushed into the darkness of your unconscious mind. And the universe, in its infinite wisdom, keeps presenting you with people who embody these rejected aspects until you're forced to look at them consciously. Do you know why that arrogant colleague bothers you so much? Because there's a part of you that wants to be more confident, more assertive, but you've labeled those traits as negative. Do you know why that needy friend exhausts you? Because there's a vulnerable part of yourself that you've been trying to hide from the world. The people who trigger your strongest reactions are actually your greatest teachers, showing you the parts of yourself you haven't yet integrated. Jung understood that what we resist in others persists in ourselves. Every judgment you make about another person is a judgment you're making about a disowned part of your own psyche. Every quality that disgusts you in someone else is a quality you possess but refuse to acknowledge. This is why you keep meeting the same types of people over and over again, not because the universe is cruel, but because you haven't learned the lesson they're trying to teach you. The mechanism works like this. Your unconscious mind projects onto others what it cannot accept about itself. You see in them what you cannot see in yourself. And you'll continue to attract these mirrors until you develop the courage to look directly at your own reflection. The woman who calls everyone else dramatic is usually the most dramatic person in the room. The man who constantly criticizes others for being fake is often hiding behind the biggest mask. The person who judges everyone for being selfish is typically the most self-absorbed. But here's what most people don't realize. This isn't a flaw in the system. It's the system working perfectly. These encounters aren't accidents. They're appointments with your own evolution. Every person who pushes your buttons is inviting you to examine something within yourself that needs attention, healing, or integration. The truth that nobody wants to face is this: you don't randomly encounter people. You magnetically attract them based on your unconscious patterns, unresolved wounds, and disowned aspects of self. The people in your life are not coincidences. They're co-conspirators in your psychological development, whether you realize it or not. Jung called this phenomenon projection, but it goes deeper than simple psychological transference. What we're talking about is the fundamental interconnectedness of human consciousness. In the deepest layers of psyche, we're all connected through what Jung termed the collective unconscious, a shared psychic space containing universal human experiences, emotions, and archetypal patterns. But here's something that will disturb you even more deeply. The person you think you are is largely constructed from rejecting certain qualities you witnessed in others. Your identity is built on a foundation of, "I'm not like them." You pride yourself on being generous because you despise selfish people. You cultivate humility because you're disgusted by arrogance. You develop loyalty because you were hurt by betrayal. Your entire personality structure is organized around avoiding becoming the people who triggered you. This creates what Jung called the tyranny of the opposite. You become so focused on not being like certain people that you swing to the opposite extreme, cutting off parts of your authentic nature in the process. The person who swears they'll never be like their angry father becomes passive-aggressive. The woman who refuses to be needy like her mother becomes emotionally unavailable. The man who rejects his father's weakness becomes rigidly controlling. When you meet someone who feels familiar, even though you've never met them before, you're recognizing archetypal patterns. When you find yourself inexplicably drawn to certain people or repelled by others, you're responding to the dance of projection and recognition happening at unconscious levels. These aren't just personal reactions. They're the psyche's way of showing you what needs to be integrated for your wholeness. Here's where it gets even more complex. Your projections aren't just about individual psychology. They're also about collective healing. The person who triggers your deepest wound might be showing you not just your personal shadow, but a wound that needs healing in your family lineage, your culture, your society. Sometimes you're not just healing yourself, you're healing generations of trauma that have been passed down through unconscious patterns. The mother who struggles with her daughter's sexuality might be healing centuries of feminine shame. The son who rebels against his father's authority might be breaking patterns of patriarchal domination that go back generations. The friend who challenges your people-pleasing might be helping you heal ancestral patterns of survival through submission. These encounters aren't just personal, they're evolutionary. But here's where it gets uncomfortable. Most people spend their entire lives running from these mirrors instead of learning from them. They change jobs to avoid difficult colleagues, end relationships to escape challenging partners, move cities to get away from triggering family dynamics. But you can't outrun your own psyche. The same patterns will emerge wherever you go, because the common denominator in all your relationships is you. And here's the cruelest truth. The people you judge most harshly are often the ones most similar to you at the unconscious level. The colleague you call fake might share your tendency to wear masks. The friend you label as dramatic might reflect your own unexpressed emotionality. The family member you see as selfish might mirror your own unacknowledged needs. The intensity of your judgment is directly proportional to how much you're seeing your own reflection. The person who betrayed your trust? They're showing you where you betray yourself. The partner who abandoned you? They're reflecting your own self-abandonment. The friend who manipulates you? They're mirroring your own manipulative tendencies. The boss who doesn't see your worth? They're showing you how you don't value yourself. This isn't victim blaming. It's recognition of the deeper psychological dynamics at play. Jung was revolutionary because he understood that psychological healing happens through relationship and projection, not despite it. The goal isn't to find people who don't trigger you. It's to understand why certain people trigger you and what they're revealing about your unconscious mind. Every difficult person in your life is offering you a gift, the opportunity to see and integrate a disowned part of yourself. But there's another layer to this that most people miss. Your projections also reveal your unlived potential. The person you're most attracted to often embodies qualities you've suppressed in yourself. The leader you admire reflects your own unexpressed authority. The artist you're drawn to mirrors your own creative potential. The rebel who fascinates you shows your own suppressed authenticity. These aren't just projections, they're invitations to become more fully yourself. The most challenging relationships are often the most transformative because they force you to confront aspects of yourself you've been avoiding. The narcissistic parent shows you where you need to develop healthy self-love. The critical partner reveals your own inner critic. The unavailable lover mirrors your unavailability to yourself. These aren't punishments, they're invitations to psychological wholeness. But most people resist this truth because it requires taking radical responsibility for your inner world. It's easier to blame others than to examine your own projections. It's more comfortable to see yourself as the victim of other people's dysfunction than to recognize how you've unconsciously participated in creating these dynamics. The cruelest part is that you'll keep attracting the same types of relationships until you integrate what they're trying to teach you. The woman who keeps attracting emotionally unavailable men will continue this pattern until she addresses her own emotional unavailability. The man who repeatedly finds himself in relationships with crazy women will keep meeting unstable partners until he integrates his own inner chaos. This is why personal growth work often feels so threatening. When you start to change and integrate your shadow aspects, the people around you begin to shift. Some relationships deepen and become more authentic. Others fall away because they were based on unconscious projections rather than genuine connection. The people who were mirrors for your unhealed aspects may no longer serve that function once you've done the inner work. And here's what's both beautiful and terrifying. As you become more conscious of your projections, you start attracting different types of people. Your outer world begins to reflect your inner transformation. But this process requires you to take full responsibility for your psychological material and stop seeing others as the source of your problems. The path to freedom from unconscious projection begins with a radical shift in perspective. Instead of asking, "Why do they behave this way?" start asking, "What is this person reflecting about me?" This single question can transform your entire relationship with human dynamics. But I warn you, this practice will make you uncomfortable. It will challenge your victim stories, your righteousness, your carefully constructed identity as someone who has their life together while others are the problem. When someone irritates you, pause before reacting. Instead of immediately focusing on what they're doing wrong, get curious about what they're mirroring. That colleague who takes credit for everything. Where in your life do you fail to acknowledge your own contributions? That friend who's always playing victim. Where do you avoid taking responsibility? That family member who's constantly dramatic. Where do you create unnecessary chaos in your own life? Jung understood that the individuation process, becoming who you truly are, requires integrating your shadow. This means acknowledging and accepting the parts of yourself you've rejected. The goal isn't to become these negative traits, but to consciously recognize that you possess the full spectrum of human qualities. You have the capacity for generosity and selfishness, love and hate, wisdom and foolishness, strength and weakness. The practice is simple, but not easy. When you notice a strong reaction to someone, write down exactly what bothers you about them. Be specific. They're selfish becomes they prioritize their needs without considering others. They're fake becomes they present a different version of themselves depending on who they're with. Then honestly ask yourself, where do I do this in my own life? The answer might not be obvious immediately, but if you're willing to look, you'll find it. But there's an even more advanced level to this practice. Once you identify the projection, the next step is integration. This doesn't mean becoming the negative quality, but rather consciously developing the healthy expression of that energy. If you're triggered by someone's selfishness, you might need to learn healthy self-care. If you're bothered by someone's aggression, you might need to develop healthy assertiveness. If you're irritated by someone's emotionality, you might need to reconnect with your own emotional expression. The shadow isn't entirely negative. It contains repressed vitality, creativity, and power that you rejected because it didn't fit your ideal self-image. The person who triggers you is often showing you an energy you need to reclaim, albeit in an unconscious or distorted form. Your job is to find the conscious, integrated expression of that energy within yourself. Here's what will happen as you practice this. You'll start to feel less triggered by other people's behavior. When you own your projections, you reclaim the energy you were spending on judgment and irritation. You'll find yourself becoming more compassionate, not because you're trying to be a better person, but because you recognize your shared humanity with even the most difficult people. But there's resistance to this work. Your ego doesn't want to admit that the qualities you despise in others exist within you. Your mind will create elaborate stories about how you're different, how your version of these traits is justified while theirs is not. This is the ego defending its constructed identity. Push through this resistance. The discomfort is the growth. The resistance often shows up as spiritual bypassing, the tendency to use psychological or spiritual concepts to avoid dealing with uncomfortable truths. You might think, I'm beyond judgment, while secretly feeling superior to others. You might claim to see everyone as perfect, while still feeling triggered by certain behaviors. True shadow work requires brutal honesty about your actual reactions, not your idealized spiritual self-image. As you integrate your shadow, you'll also start recognizing the positive projections you make. The people you idolize, put on pedestals, or see as having something you lack are also mirrors. They're showing you disowned positive qualities, your own unexpressed potential. The confident speaker you admire has activated your own unexpressed confidence. The compassionate healer you're drawn to is reflecting your own capacity for healing. Instead of worshipping these qualities in others, recognize them as invitations to develop these aspects within yourself. The transformation deepens when you realize that everyone in your life is playing a role in your psychological development. Your difficult boss is teaching you about boundaries and self-worth. Your critical mother is showing you your own inner critic so you can heal it. Your unreliable friend is revealing where you don't trust yourself. Once you understand this, you can engage with these relationships from a place of consciousness rather than unconscious reactivity. This doesn't mean you have to tolerate toxic behavior or stay in harmful relationships. Boundaries are essential for psychological health, but you can set boundaries from a place of understanding rather than victimhood, from consciousness rather than reactivity. You can remove yourself from harmful dynamics while still appreciating the lessons they offered about your own psyche. The most profound shift happens when you stop trying to change other people and focus entirely on changing yourself. When you withdraw your projections, you often find that your relationships transform naturally. People respond differently to you because you're relating to them from a different inner state. The energy you were putting into trying to fix or control others gets redirected toward your own development. But this path requires enormous honesty and humility. You must be willing to see yourself clearly, including the parts you'd rather keep hidden. You must be willing to take responsibility for your psychological material instead of blaming others for your reactions. This isn't always comfortable, but it's the only path to genuine freedom from the patterns that keep you stuck. Jung said the privilege of a lifetime is being who you are, but you can only become who you truly are by integrating all aspects of yourself, the light and the dark, the beautiful and the ugly, the noble and the petty. Every person who triggers you is offering you a piece of this integration. They're showing you a part of yourself that needs attention, acceptance, or development. The goal isn't to become perfect or eliminate all negative qualities. It's to become conscious of your full humanity and to stop projecting your unconscious material onto others. When you achieve this, you'll find that your relationships become more authentic, your reactions less intense, and your capacity for genuine love and acceptance far greater. When you stop unconsciously projecting onto others and start seeing them as mirrors for your own development, everything changes. The world becomes less threatening and more interesting. People become less irritating and more instructive. Relationships become less about finding someone to complete you and more about two whole individuals choosing to grow together. You discover that the people who once triggered your strongest reactions have become your greatest teachers. That difficult family member helped you develop patience and boundaries. That unreliable friend taught you about trust and self-reliance. That critical boss showed you your own inner critic so you could heal it. Every challenging relationship becomes a gift when viewed through the lens of psychological development. But the most profound change is internal. When you reclaim your projections, you reclaim your power. You stop being a victim of other people's behavior and start being a conscious participant in your own evolution. You realize that external circumstances don't determine your inner state. Your consciousness does. This doesn't mean you become passive or tolerant of harmful behavior. Actually, the opposite happens. When you're no longer projecting your unconscious material onto others, you can see situations more clearly and respond more effectively. You can set boundaries without anger, end relationships without bitterness, and navigate conflict without losing your center. Jung understood that individuation, becoming whole, requires this kind of conscious relationship with your projections. When you stop meeting yourself in disguise and start recognizing yourself clearly, you become free to create authentic relationships based on genuine connection rather than unconscious psychological needs. The people who remain in your life after this transformation are there for different reasons. They're not there to trigger your unhealed wounds or reflect your disowned aspects. They're there because you genuinely enjoy their company, share values, and support each other's growth. These relationships have a completely different quality, more peaceful, more honest, more nourishing. You also discover that you have choice in how you respond to every person and situation. You're no longer unconsciously reacting based on old patterns and projections. You can choose compassion over judgment, curiosity over irritation, understanding over condemnation. This is true freedom, not freedom from other people's behavior, but freedom from being unconsciously controlled by your reactions to their behavior. The rebirth is complete when you realize that everyone you meet is both a teacher and a student, both a mirror and a mystery. You approach relationships with humility, knowing that every person has something to teach you about yourself and about life. You become genuinely curious about others instead of immediately judging them. You recognize that we're all struggling, all learning, all trying to find our way back to wholeness. This is what Jung meant when he said we meet ourselves time and again in 1,000 disguises. Once you understand this truth, every encounter becomes an opportunity for growth. Every relationship a chance for greater self-awareness. Every difficult person a guide toward integration and wholeness. Today, we learned from Carl Jung that the people we encounter are not random. They're reflections of our own psyche, mirrors showing us aspects of ourselves that need attention, healing, or integration. From ancient philosophy, we discover that self-knowledge is the highest wisdom, and that wisdom often comes disguised as the very people who challenge us most. If these insights sparked a moment of recognition for you, hit the like button to share this wisdom with others who might benefit from understanding their relationships differently. Subscribe to join our PSYphile community, where we dive deeper into life-changing psychological and philosophical ideas every week. Become a PSYphile and explore more concepts that transform how we see ourselves and the world around us. Take a moment to like this video and subscribe to our YouTube channel, PSYphile. Write in the comments, "I choose to see the mirrors," if you're ready to start recognizing your own reflections in others. Let's see how many here are prepared for this level of self-awareness and personal responsibility. Until we meet again, remember that every person you encounter is offering you a gift, the opportunity to know yourself more deeply. Jung's wisdom reminds us that the path to individuation runs through conscious relationship with our projections, and that true freedom comes from recognizing ourselves in the thousand disguises life presents us. And don't forget, keep watching the next video where we'll explore how your emotional triggers are actually your greatest guides to psychological wholeness. See you there, fellow PSYphile.